What is in the Bronx? The Bronx is the northernmost borough of New York City. If you look closely, it's dissected in half by the Bronx River, and alongside it runs a major road. Along this artery are some major green spaces: the Cortlandt Park and Woodlawn Cemetery, New York Botanical Garden, and the Bronx Zoo. Another significant green landmark is Pelham Bay Park with Orchard Beach. Often, the Bronx is even further dissected into northwest, northeast, southwest, and southeast. But you may have heard of the term South Bronx, which historically is within the southwest quadrant. Some say this is the South Bronx, others say it's this, and some say it's this. Which brings me to my preamble before we talk about the neighborhoods of the Bronx. These neighborhood boundaries are not all official. They're cultural boundaries that shift over time. And some neighborhoods overlap each other, and you'll see that in the map. Now, without further ado, let's start with the Northwest Bronx. The large green space in this area is Cortlandt Park, right next to Woodlawn Cemetery. At Cortlandt Park, you can play golf, tennis, horseback, and use all these other facilities. Tucked away in the corner, north of Woodlawn Cemetery, where a lot of notable people are buried, is the neighborhood of Woodlawn Heights. Super out of reach from the subway, but surrounded with a lot of green. To the west of Cortlandt Park, also hard to get to with public transit, but you have some beautiful neighborhoods: North Riverdale, Riverdale with Hudson Hill, Fieldston, and Spuyten Duyvil, although some would say this is South Riverdale. South of Cortlandt Park is the Jerome Park Reservoir, which is part of the New York City water supply system. It collects water from upstate New York and distributes it to parts of the Bronx and Manhattan. Next to the reservoir, if you're a fan of Spider-Man, you might have heard of the Bronx High School of Science, which was the school that the Spider-Man movie modeled. Bronx Science is indeed one of the top high schools in the country. And a bit of trivia for you: Tom Holland, who played Spider-Man, actually shadowed a student for 2 days at the school to get a bit of an immersion of what it's like to be at that school. And next to Bronx Science is Lehman College. Because of the reservoir, this area is known as the Jerome Park neighborhood. It's flanked by the neighborhoods of Kingsbridge and Norwood, which is also known as Bainbridge. And the Jerome Park area itself overlaps Kingsbridge Heights and Bedford Park. Not too far away is a private university, Fordham University. Thus, the name of the neighborhood, Fordham, which consists of Fordham Manor and Fordham Heights. And of course, you can't forget the New York Botanical Garden. This place consists of 250 acres of plants. To give you an idea, that's half the size of Monaco. And to the south is the Bronx Zoo, which is even larger than the Botanical Garden with more than 4,000 animals. And with that, we've already crossed over to Southwest Bronx, or historically known as South Bronx. Historically, areas in the South Bronx have had challenges: economic challenges, challenges with crime, and urban decay. Because of this, there are some areas in the South Bronx that have a reputation for being less safe. But it's important to note that there have been efforts by community groups, government organizations to improve these areas. In addition to other educational institutions mentioned, there's also Bronx Community College that sits on a former NYU campus, thus the name of the area, University Heights. And we already mentioned Fordham and Fordham Heights. Right next to it is Belmont, which has Little Italy. Italian immigrants have come here over a century ago, and Italian culture is still strong today. The popular Little Italy, that's more mainstream and full of tourists, is the one in Manhattan. But if you want to be a little more off-grid, a little more adventurous, go to the one in the Bronx. However, just the other day, a couple days before filming this, someone was complaining how that area, the Little Italy area in the Bronx, is suddenly just getting more and more tourists. Moving on, Morris Heights is known to be the birthplace of hip-hop music. Although the South Bronx as a whole is known to have cultivated this hip-hop genre, it's in Morris Heights that they say hip-hop was born. Moving along are more residential neighborhoods: Mount Hope, Tremont, and West Farms. South of that is another large green space, Crotona Park, with 28 tennis courts, an Olympic-sized pool, baseball diamonds, soccer fields, and all these other sports and recreational facilities. Crotona Park is within the neighborhoods of Morrisania and Crotona Park East, or sometimes they just call it Crotona or East Morrisania. And Morrisania is Claremont Village, and next to it is Claremont, Mount Eden, and Highbridge. And for you baseball fans, we can't leave out Yankee Stadium. If you need a guide on how to watch a Yankees game, link to this video is in the description below. The Yankee Baseball Stadium is in the neighborhood of Concourse. Next to it is Concourse Village, Melrose, and Longwood, which consists of Foxhurst and Woodstock. And at the very tip of South Bronx is Mott Haven with Port Morris and Hunts Point. Moving to the southeast are more residential neighborhoods. Starting from the bottom, there's Classen Point with Harding Park. Then there's Soundview with Soundview Park that has a kayak and canoe launch area, along with other park facilities. And just north is Park Versailles. I wasn't sure what the pronunciation of this neighborhood was, if it was Park Versailles, like in Versailles, France, or it's Park Versailles, because sometimes when you hop over to the pond, the pronunciation changes. If you know how to pronounce this neighborhood in the Bronx, comment down below. Further east is Castle Hill, Union Port, Parkchester, Westchester Square, Van Ness, Pelham Parkway, and Morris Park. Then there's Throgs Neck, where you'll see a giant golf course and cemeteries north of it. And finally, there's Pelham Bay with Schuylerville and Country Club. Moving into our fourth quadrant are again more residential neighborhoods. There's Allerton, Pelham Gardens, Baychester, Laconia, Williamsbridge, and Allenville. Co-op City is the largest cooperative housing development in the world, thus the name Co-op City. And finishing the quadrant are Eastchester, Edenwald, and Wakefield. Which brings us to the outliers. Pelham Bay Park is the largest public park in New York City. That's 3.5 times larger than Central Park, and it has Orchard Beach, which is the only public beach in the Bronx. And just like all the large parks in New York, Pelham Bay Park has no lack of recreational facilities. Beyond Pelham Bay Park are some islands, but only City Island is inhabited. South of the Bronx is Rikers Island, the location of New York City's jail. The entire island houses correctional and mental institutions. And the uninhabited islands near it are North Brother and South Brother Islands. So as you can see, the Bronx has dozens and dozens of neighborhoods within its borough, and you could easily talk about any of them. They all have their own history and cultural background. We could easily talk about the New York Botanical Garden, the Bronx Zoo, or Rikers, or the history of the Bronx. There's a lot to talk about there, but this video was meant as a geographical reference on the different neighborhoods of the Bronx and how they relate to each other. And speaking of geography and maps, I have with me the map that I presented here in this video, and this is available as a downloadable product at the Urban Caffeine shop, or you can order a physical print. So there you have it. If you want a reference of all the Bronx neighborhoods, check out shop.urbancaffeine.com. Which brings me to the question of the day. If you're from the Bronx, which neighborhood are you from? And tell us a little bit about your neighborhood. And if there's a neighborhood or neighborhoods that you would recommend to someone who's never been to the Bronx, comment down below. With that, I'll end by saying Patreon members get 15% off whenever you shop at shop.urbancaffeine.com. Thank you all so much for watching, and until the next video, happy New Yorking.